Richard Speck, Part 1. This is going to be the first video of the Richard Speck true crime thing. This is just going to be a first part, which is only going to be from 1941 to 1953, which is his early life stage. I'm going to break his entire life down. We're going to kind of discuss things that could have turned him into what he turned into, or if he was born the way he was. Richard Speck was born on the 6th of December, 1941 in Kirkwood, Illinois, to Benjamin Franklin Speck, who was 47 at the time, and Mary Margaret Speck, who was 38 at the time. Shortly after his birth, the family relocated their 8 children to Monmouth, Illinois, where Benjamin found work as a warehouse packer for, I believe the company was called Western Stoneware. And luckily he had a bunch of background experience with labor jobs like logging and farming. Until the birth of his younger sister Caroline, which wasn't until 2 years later, Richard was significantly younger than the rest of his siblings, causing him to be relatively isolated from the rest of his family. However, it did help when Caroline was born because it helped put a buffer between his overbearing mother's dotiness. Mary Margaret ran a very crowded but disciplined home. She hung religion over every child's head, pretty much making them think that if they acted out, there would be an eternal punishment through God. When her eldest children, Irma and Robert, were moving out of the house, she started to get even more protective of her younger children, including Richard and Caroline, even crying when it came time to start school. Now, on the other hand, was Benjamin Franklin Speck, his father. Now, Benjamin had profound faith, but he was very reserved and quiet about it. Between the two parents, Richard definitely chose to model after his respectful father versus his overbearing, controlling mother. Now, Benjamin and Richard also had a very close relationship, almost unique to the rest of the family, even to the point that the family didn't really quite understand it, but there was an unspoken respect between the two of them. An example of this is when Richard was told that he had to start wearing glasses to be able to see the blackboard in class. This is around grade school. He already had social anxiety with having to stand up and read in front of the class or talk in front of the class. So when he was told that he had to wear glasses, he felt that it was going to be targeting him out for bullying and was very, very nervous about it. To the point that he wouldn't wear them to school even after getting the prescription for his glasses, and would only wear them if his father told him to. He even had this weird thought that he shouldn't wear the glasses because it shows weakness, and that's something his father would never do. His father would never show weakness. Richard truly idolized his father, so on the 29th of December in 1947, when he got the news that his father had passed away from an unexpected heart attack at the age of 53, Richard only being 6, it obviously took a huge toll on him. Only a few years after his father died, his mother met and remarried a charming man named Carl August Rudolph Lindbergh, who was a traveling salesman with a peg leg. Carl Lindbergh had a 25-year criminal history, starting with forgery and several arrests for drunk driving. It was extremely clear that he was the complete opposite of Richard's sober and hardworking father. The 10th of May in, I believe, 1950, Mary and Carl officially got married. Mary moved down to Santo, Texas with Carl. She left behind Richard at age 9 and Caroline at age 7 to finish out the school year, and they would live with their older sister, Sarah Thornton, in Monmouth until they would be able to finish the school year and then move down to Texas and start school there. After the marriage, Richard fell into a deep depression that none of the family had ever seen before, even to the point of not talking to his best friend, which was his little sister Caroline. Once the school year started in Monmouth, he wouldn't go. He refused to. His sister would ask him to, and sometimes he would give in and go, but that would be the full extent of his participation. He wouldn't socialize. He wouldn't even acknowledge the teacher when spoken to. When the school year ended, it was time to move from a busy town, Monmouth, Illinois, to a rural, boring town, Santo, Texas. The house in Santo was littered with empty liquor bottles that overwhelmed Mary to even be able to clean up, and there was also at least one ashtray in every single room in the house. Viewed by others, Carl wasn't a cruel man, especially towards Mary or Caroline, but it really wasn't the case when it came to Richard. He would start with comments here and there, maybe little things about the boy's appearance that he could maybe change about himself, and then Richard would reply with nothing, just complete silence, which would irk Carl, and he eventually escalated to real, just cutting insults towards this boy. This meaning that any positive self-esteem that Richard may have had as a young child was completely just drained. This being the case, His first year in Santa was horrible. Richard soon grew an inner voice of all the horrible things Carl was saying to him and about him. This pretty much happened because most of the things that Carl was saying were true, making them even more painful. Richard became a strange-looking, gawky, lanky kid who really just couldn't talk when spoken to, was easily embarrassed, especially when it came to women. So, just a quick run through. His main traumatic moments are going to be obviously his father dying, having to move across the country to a completely new state with a new dad, away from the rest of your siblings who live in Illinois, and having this overbearing mother that's using religion and hanging that over his head to make him feel shame and guilt. To add to this trauma, and what I like to call red flag, that would lead him to do what he did, is that one day, while Carl was doing his normal verbal abuse to Richard, he had said something about Richard's dead father. And to Richard, that was a bit of a last straw, a step over the line. He responded by lunging at Carl, swinging his fists. Carl pushed him down to the kitchen floor, laughing at him, mocking him for his weakness, and Richard responded with picking up a hammer from a nearby toolbox and going to hit Carl in the head. Carl goes to block it, and it rebounds off him and hits Richard in the skull at the age of 10. Richard fell to the floor unconscious. Carl tried to wake him up, and when he did, he said, "We are never going to speak of this again," and they both never did. But this is obviously, it ties into serial killers, mass murder, blah blah blah, violent criminals, because some of them are tied back to childhood brain traumas. So this could have contributed to his future behavior, as well as the horrible upbringing that he had to go through. And that's why I'm trying to make these videos, is not everyone's born a murderer. Some people are born a murderer. We don't know, and the only way to know is to break down these small little pieces that most people don't think matter. But they do. Simply not wearing his glasses at school, having that social anxiety and not really having the support that he needed to feel confident. And right at the age where he was supposed to build that confidence, he loses his father and he gains a new father who treats him like shit and dirt. And you're gonna believe you are when people treat you like that. 1 year after settling in Santos, the family was relocated by Carl to East Dallas. This was around 1951. At this point, they moved around to various accommodations that most of them were flea-ridden homes. I think they cycled through at least 10 different homes. And even though after the hammer incident, Carl said, "We're never gonna speak of this again," he still continued to verbally abuse Richard. The injury from the incident changed Richard's temper completely, from being a calm, restrained boy that was respectful and took after his father's, personality, to completely running wild. Before, he never could stand attention, but now if he thought anybody was looking at him, he would completely lash out. To add more emotional trauma to this boy's plate, in 1952, his eldest brother Robert was killed while riding his motorcycle to work in Illinois by a drunk driver. Ironic, considering that Carl was, Now, Richard hadn't seen his brother since they moved to Texas, and he ultimately felt that the family's absence in Illinois was the cause for his brother's death, which in turn made him blame Carl, which is understandable. But now, Carl is his only adult male role model. Now, age 12, Richard took advantage of all the empty beer and whiskey bottles strewn throughout the house, and even if he did run out at home, it was really easy to just go into the streets of East Dallas and get alcohol, pills, and powders, the whole list of them. The behavior obviously faltered his school attendance as he continued to be drunk and drugged out of his mind. His addiction to a whole variety of narcotics that started in childhood was going to continue as he grew up. And that's where we're going to leave off, because that's where stuff starts to escalate. Two things. I forgot to tell you the book that I am taking information from and citing from. It's The Townhouse Massacre by Ryan Green. It's really good. He's really good at getting into the people's heads and making it like you're in their shoes. He does have an eye on the cover. I just chose to cross it out. Also, thank you again for watching, and there will be more to come.